Hey everyone, welcome to the Field and Garden Podcast. I'm Jessie from the Gardener's Workshop. Today I'm sharing a recent Clubhouse chat where Lisa covers the topic of selling your flowers, or more accurately perhaps, why you may not be selling them and what you can do about it. She offers some great tips, as well as her thoughts about the future of the U.S. cut flower market. It's a good listen, so I hope you enjoy.
Folks, welcome to the Flower Farmer Show, and I am so glad to be here today with you. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I am joined here by team member Jessie Graven, who is a fellow flower farmer and a member of the Gardener's Workshop, and she is here to help facilitate us to have a great conversation. Thank you, Jessie, for being here. I think I should have named this talk not selling your flowers, because there's a lot of suffering going on, and I'm looking forward to talking and sharing some of my insights with you guys. You know, I remember oh so well back in a different time in the flower world, where local was not even really a buzzword, and sales were even more difficult back then than I think they are today, for sure. But for those of you that aren't selling, they surely still seem pretty difficult, right? I do want to say that flower sales in today's landscape, the pandemic has made local so much more relevant, so much easier once you finally find your pathway. But it wasn't always that way, and I do suspect it'll kind of go back a little bit that way once things kind of settle down. I find, and I picked this topic after seeing so much on social media of, there's just some of our peers out there that haven't found their niche yet. And many of them had what I refer to as high value crops. Those are crops that take a big investment to get in and get started. And, they didn't have sales for them. I can think of at least 3 instances specifically of people sitting on thousands of tulips that they had no sales for. And, what I want to just kind of share is, I'm a big fan of anybody that's hung around with me for long enough, or you've taken my course. You know that I am a strong supporter of how to farm on low investment crops. And what that means is basically from starting from seed, because there is nothing worse than being stuck, rushing in, going for all the gold, meaning, ranunculus, anemones, and tulips, and you don't even have a customer list yet, friends. You have to have an enormous customer list to really sell all your flowers, or most of your flowers. And I think I was under the illusion, and I think a lot of us are, I was under this illusion that my flowers were so dadgum beautiful that people were just going to rush to buy them. And yes, there is a small slice of the population that may feel that same way as you do, but are they going to be there to buy your flowers week after week after week after week? And that's why you have to have, if you want to sell flowers, a lot of flowers every week. We sold to 23 florists, 2 supermarket chains, at a bouquet subscription service. We sold at farmers markets. And we had our members only market on the farm. And people are like, oh my gosh, it's like we grew a lot of flowers. And not every customer buys flowers every week. And I'm kind of jumping all over here, y'all, because this is just such a topic that there's so much to say about. So I'm just going to back up for just a minute. And I want to say that all of us, I think, feel this way. We all just want to stay home and grow beautiful flowers and hand them off to somebody. None of us wants to be the salesperson. None of us wants to do the business side of things. I can, in fact, I've shared this story in the past that I come from a really big, very successful entrepreneurial family. And I can remember being somewhere with one of said cousins who was an incredibly successful guy. And he was saying, I really like what you're doing, Lisa. And I can remember looking at him and saying, I just want to grow flowers. Can't somebody else do all this business side of things? I think I was struggling with bookwork right then. The selling side of things and the bookworking side of things. And you know what he said to me? He said, Lisa, that is every entrepreneur's dream. But the reality is, to be an entrepreneur, you have to master all of those things. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to do all of it yourself forever. But you first have to master before you can ask someone else to do it for you. And first off, it just made me like, oh, it's not just me. This is something that every person that owns a small business has to do. And that kind of helped me a little bit. But what I want to also relate is that I am also incredibly valuable, but you have to have knowledge and education. And when you start hanging out with the people that are doing the same thing you are, I attribute my years at the Cut Flower Association, being on that board, as some of the heights of my career because I learned so much there. When you have knowledge about your flowers, what you're growing, what the difference in your flowers and the flower that florist is importing, or your flowers and the flower of the vegetable farmer that is down there selling sunflowers for $2 a bunch that are already too old by the time he cut them. I never bash, I never call out. I try to show you the positive side of things and allow your brain to do the rest of the, well, gosh, if she said that, then that over there must not be right. You gain power through having that kind of power. And when you have that sales, you're solving somebody's problem by offering them something to purchase. And if you look at it that way, so many of us, and I was right there with you. I didn't want to be salesy. I didn't want to be, but if you do your homework, and what is that homework? It's gaining a customer base. Let's just say you want to sell to florist because you make an impression that way that is pretty hard to shake. And certainly there's other ways to do it. This is just the way that I do it. Well, you don't want to walk in and drop an armload of tulips or ranunculus, high investment crops. But to walk in and drop an armload of bells of Ireland and snaps and poppies, maybe Sweet William, all those classics that are so low investment other than your time, is pretty amazing. You don't want to be finding your customers with those high value crops. And here's the other thing. So many of these high value crops that we're just coming out of right now are really before so many of our other crops come on. So that means you really can't gather up your customers. So this all leads me to, I do not recommend people that are under, at least 1 year, but most likely 2 to 3 years in before they really start investing their money in these crops that come on early in the season, where you have to really have a great customer base to be able to sell those, right? So some realities of not selling flowers is, first off, it's normal, y'all. I can tell you that back in my early years when I was selling just to florist, there was about a 5-year period where that's all I did. And this was before I had what we call standing orders, which are orders that customers don't call and give to you. They sign up and say, I'd like $500 worth of flowers every Monday from you. We didn't have big standing orders yet. And during late July and August, our florist business was in the ditch. But guess what? I had to cut the flowers to keep more flowers coming. So those things happen until you really build up a robust customer base. And the way you do that is by romancing those customers during the season that you have gorgeous flowers let's face it, you don't ask somebody to marry you before you go out on a few dates. Literally. We'll hear more after we take a quick break. Here at the Gardener's Workshop, the Field and Garden Podcast is just one of the ways we are telling the stories of gardeners and farmers, sharing the ways that they grow flowers and businesses. We also have the Field and Garden blog, our video resource guide, plus our YouTube channel and our online garden shop that includes the same tools, seeds, and supplies you hear mentioned on this podcast. Other resources include our online schools and on-demand courses covering flower farming, gardening, and more, all available at thegardenersworkshop.com. Stay in the loop of all the happenings here at TGW by requesting our free weekly e-farm news. It is the front page to the happenings here at TGW. Sign up below or over at thegardenersworkshop.com. I think that people are quick to throw in the towel. Back before I did that, I sporadically planted sunflowers. Nobody counted on them. They just most of them sold when I had them. Then I started planting them every week. My intention, as I had been instructed by Pamela Arnowski, was to get our commercial customers on board. It took me over a year of giving free samples every week in what was their already big order from me of my sunflowers to break my florist's habit. But sometimes it's more than a habit. So they had a standing order of sunflowers that were shipped in from somewhere. I mean, somebody on the East Coast was growing them, but they were still just in terrible shape when they received them. They really were the saddest sunflowers ever. Anyway, what had happened is what I didn't know as I was romancing this particular florist was they had actually committed to that grower for X number of weeks to get a certain price. So that's what kind of held them back. But what I want to say to you is every week that florist bought from me, if I had sunflowers that were unsold, you better believe I put a couple of bunches as a freebie to keep my sunflowers in front of them, because I knew when the day came that they said, I'll take your flowers, which it did come. And he took 20 bunches of sunflowers a week, y'all. 20 bunches. It pays off. But it was a hard row. I composted a lot of sunflowers. So I'm just encouraging you, you have to build a customer base. And you do that by finding out what your niche is going to be. If you're just sitting at a farmer's market with no customers, you better do something different. If there's not foot traffic, then you need to get into a different market or go a different direction. For every 15 people that walk past your booth, maybe one might consider buying flowers. So you need a lot of foot traffic. So it's bigger. It's not just that you're not doing something wrong. It's bigger than that. And I want to say that getting knowledgeable, and when you have knowledge, it makes you confident. And I am so quick to say to somebody, I have no idea how to do that. I just told somebody on Ask a Flower Farmer on Instagram earlier today. They asked me about lilacs. I said, I am so sorry. I have never grown a lilac. I have no clue when you're supposed to cut them. That it empowers people to hear me say that. To be transparent and real, and it'll work the same way for you with your customers. Dave Dowling and I are in total agreement that you should be composting 20% of what you grow. If you sell out, you're missing out on customers. So you should be growing enough that you're bringing home the scraps to compost, and that is perfectly normal. Our newest course, Collectives 101. If you don't know what that is, you need to go over to that page and listen to Amelia's, I think it's like a 2 or 3 minute video. Collectives are like basically similar to a co-op that are a bunch of growers getting together to sell. Amelia is the leading expert in the industry on this method of selling, and her introductory video plays right there on the page. I totally believe it is the future of the domestic cut flower industry, the lion's share of it anyway, for farmers to come together so that farmers can farm and the collective can sell. And so check that out. Hi, Danielle. Do you have a question?
Hi, Lisa. Yes, I do. So we're in our 4th year of growing here on the farm, and this year I think we're going to take the leap and try to get into some grocery stores. So my question for you is, when you went for some of the bigger chains like Harris Teeter and such, did you bring samples of your bouquets and bunches to the stores, or did you kind of go through the channels of applying as a vendor and going the online route?
So that's a really great question. So the way it happened for us is I actually, first off, I would say there's two ways that you can do it. There's the way that we did it, and then the way that you kind of suggested. So I actually just happened to be in one of the stores, a fresh market, and saw the flower manager and said, "Hey, I'm local. Do y'all buy local?" And she said, "Oh my gosh, yes." And she happened to give me, she said, "You have to go through corporate, connect with them." So I connected with corporate, who I talked to a secretary, and she said, "Give me your website." And she said, if they like the way your website looks, they'll be in touch. And in fact, that's what happened. But what I did with Harris Teeter was I walked in with an armload of samples, just like I did for the florist. So I tend to believe that I think walking in with samples of what you have is by far the best way to go. I mean, you're leaving free samples, so it doesn't really, they're not going to buy them. You know that you're just in there to try to get that flower person to give you the information that you need, and for that person to kind of say, oh my gosh, to their manager or to the home office, this amazing flower person came in here. That's what you're trying to really create. And the one thing I would say is, it wouldn't hurt when you were in there shopping, perhaps, to say to the person in the flower department, say, who is the manager of the flower department these days? And get their name, and then say, when is she normally here? I just wanted to ask her a question, as and to try to hit the department when the highest person that you can find on the chain is there. And it's really the flower department people that you want to hit, because they're the ones that know flowers. The rest of the people, like the store manager, may not be so helpful. So I think free samples, package the way that you're going to package them so they can really see that you're a pro. And I just encourage you to do that. I was so pleasantly surprised how willing they were to work with local. And I will tell you this too, that some of the bigger chains that I assumed wouldn't buy local, they didn't seem like like they're just a giant grocery store. Some of them also have big budgets to buy local. So don't knock somebody out of the running just because you think they're not a warm, fuzzy, local looking kind of store. You know what I mean? Did that help?
Absolutely. And I guess my second question, follow up to that, is, did you apply for the UPC codes and all that stuff before you approached these people, or did you kind of wait and see what their requirements were and then fall in on that?
Yeah. So, if you remember, I was doing that back in the dinosaur age. And so, first off, I would say definitely wait, because we were not required to put barcodes on. They actually put them on when they got to the store. They did that. I don't know if that's even done anymore today, but I would definitely wait, because they may provide you with that kind of stuff. You may have to print them, but I would wait and see, find out exactly what they want before you pre-invest in anything or investigate or just waste your brain power, right? The other thing that I would encourage with supermarkets, I also negotiated. The Harris Teeter's contract was like 96 pages long to sell to them. And I totally understand. I mean, now that I've been in business this long, nothing can surprise me anymore. People are crazy. Anyway, so I totally understand why they had a 96-page contract, of which my husband read it all before I signed it. But they requested a really high liability umbrella, like $5 or $8 million. And I mean, I had a $1 million liability policy. A 5 million would like not even make it worth it for me to sell to them. I mean, it was thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a year. And I was able to negotiate that. So don't be put off. And the lesson I learned from that experience was you don't know until you ask.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate your time and your insight.
You're welcome, and the best to you. Rose, do you have a question?
Actually, I had some accidental success that I thought might be helpful to some of the other. So I got your Cool Flower book, and this was my first fall. This past fall was my first fall doing Cool Flowers. And then I took over the winter, took the basics class. And the first thing that bloomed for me was Ami and Yarrow. And what I didn't realize at the time is how those two flowers do not ship well.
Right.
And they were my first to bloom. I didn't want to wait for everything else to be bloom and take in a giant, beautiful bucket of many, many things. I simply took in a bucket of yarrow and said, here, I brought this for you. And the next week I had my first order, sold out all my Ami, sold 2 bunches of yarrow. And when I delivered that Ami bucket back to that same florist, I threw in some free yarrow. She sent me right back to my field to see how much more yarrow I could get for her. So going with just one flower is not a bad strategy, and especially if it's a flower that doesn't ship well.
That is so great, Rose. I mean, you are so right. And I think sometimes we think we have to have stuff that when you're on the other side of the fence, they're so happy to see what you have. So that is so awesome. And you know, that is so true. The Ami Magus that gets shipped in, I mean, once you start selling to florists and you're going in their back door and you start seeing this, oh my, you know what else is super sad is Buplurum. These simple flowers, that is just so awesome. I'm so happy for you. I'm so glad to hear of your success. And so that would be an encouragement. If you only have one crop, that is the crop that you're going to walk in, sweep them off their feet. And, you know, I'm hoping that your season is continuing to sell to them.
Oh, absolutely. And I also provided them I have two floral customers, and I'm limiting myself just to them this year. They asked me specifically for a list of what else I'm growing and when they can expect it. And of course, I sent it to them. And I mean, one of my florists, I'm near Tallahassee, and our football colors are garnet and gold. And she specifically said, anything you can get me in garnet and gold in the fall would be appreciated. So,
wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm growing like the mahogany splendor hibiscus for her. No commitments, but things that are in her wheelhouse, and she really appreciates it already.
You know, that is so awesome. I wonder if Purple Ruffles basil isn't in that color range too. That's just another super easy, you know, crop to grow. Rose, I so appreciate you sharing. Where'd you say you were? You're in Tallahassee?
Well, Monticello, Florida, which is near, very North Florida, near about 30 miles from Tallahassee.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, because you know what? It just encourages people to hear of other people's experiences, right? And well done, friend. Well done.
Well, thank you. I owe it to you. Appreciate it.
You did the work. That sounds awesome. You know, I want to encourage anybody that is interested at all in, so a co-op or a collective is like a wholesaler, but it's all local growers. To go over to that page, or you can click on that link and watch Amelia's video about collectives. Because I will tell you that, I mean, this is why we agreed to produce her course. I truly believe that is going to be such a bridge for so many flower farmers to be able to ramp up their growing portion, because they're not driving around in a car making delivery, making cold calls and trying to find customers. It just gives you so much leverage, and it bands you with other growers. So you know, if you have white dahlias and Jesse had white dahlias and I had white dahlias, and a customer came in and said, I need 30 dozen or 30 bunches of dahlias, white dahlias, they learn that the power of selling through collectives attracts so many more customers. And as Amelia shares in the course, I mean, in their experience, even though you feel like you're putting yourself in a direct competition with other growers, that is not what happens. You sell more through a collective than you do individually in most cases. And the savings, because you, of course, pay a fee, but that fee is quickly regained through your savings of time, labor, and expenses, and then your scaled up selling. So I want to encourage everybody to just watch her video. Amelia is a brilliant instructor, and she really lays it out. Well, thank you, Jessie, so much for hosting us.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Lisa, for being here and carrying this discussion today. Very important discussion. And thank you, everyone who joined us.
Ciao.
Okay, welcome back. I included a link in the show notes to the on-demand course that Lisa mentions here, which is a beginner's guide to selling through cut flower collectives called Collectives 101. There's also a link there to Lisa's club on the Clubhouse app. We're over there live on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern if you want to join us sometime. If you like what you're hearing here on the Field and Garden podcast, we'd love it if you'd tell a friend about us and leave a review for us wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Jessie from the Gardener's Workshop, and I hope you have a great day.